Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Red Hour, a show I do twice a week where I throw a little chaos into Star Trek and review a random episode. So I ended my episode Sunday without choosing the random episode. So I had to do it off camera. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, I closed it out, but anyway, it's Voyager season 7, episode 19, Q2. And so I had to pull back. I had to pull up the episode or the episode generator because it closed out. So right now it's on D Space Nine Paradise, but we're gonna pick a different one at the end. So this episode starts off with Egypt in Janeway's ready room, and he's telling the story. He's telling about all the things that like Kirk has done, and I think he's like basically going through like her version of Starfleet training, and he it was only supposed to be a 20-minute presentation, but he wanted to be thorough, so he's he's been talking for a long time now, and she said, it's enough. You've done a good job, and he's basically going over the history of Starfleet. So if you imagine, I don't think they had Enterprise in mind at the time, but you're talking along a lot of history there, 200 years, and the cat is doing something. Anyway, he leaves, and then all of a sudden you see this boy show up out of nowhere, and he starts talking about how Egypt's presentation was boring and all this stuff, and then Q shows up. So this is Q's son, where there was a previous episode where Q had wanted to marry Janeway, and Q's wife shows up, the actress who plays Worf's like baby mama. So anyway, that's the end of the teaser, and then get the credits in the theme. So Q's talking, or Q2. So the son is Q2. We'll just call him that. I mean, that's the episode title. So the Q2 is talking about how he's like on vacation from the Continuum, and Q wants to drop him off on Voyager so he can spend some time with humans and learn about humans. And Janeway doesn't really like this idea, and he disappears, and there's a party in engineering. So B'Elanna calls Janeway to engineering. So her and Chakotay and Tuvok show up there, and he's got the engine lights like flickering and bouncing like not a disco, but like a electric dance music thing, or a rave. and the music it sounds like kind of like a ravey thing. Every time they do future music in Star Trek, it usually sounds like that. They don't, in some episodes, well, Stranger Worlds, they did Wake Me Up Before You Go Go. So you don't hear, or Oftentimes you just hear classical music. That's the way they do in TNG a lot of the times when people are listening to music. Uh, so so she Q2 zaps, snaps his fingers and makes Balana, Chakotay, Janeway, and Tuvok like leave the engineering room, and she's frustrated about this. She goes to he stops by the cargo bay where Seven is, and strips her naked, and she's like, "Do you think I should be embarrassed about this?" And it doesn't phase her, basically. And then he messes with the replicator, so when Janeway goes to the mess hall to get some coffee, the replicator says, "Make it yourself." And then Neelix basically volunteers to kind of talk to him and thinks that he can like get him under control so he's not going around messing with everybody. So he's in Q2's in astrometrics lab. Basically starts a war with these aliens that they passed through their system before that were peaceful and stuff. And he's just messing around with them. And so Neelix tries to talk to him and tries to convince him to help these people because they one of them has problems like poverty or something, and he basically sews Neelix's mouth shut and makes it to where he can't talk anymore. And then on the bridge, the Borg show up, and the Borg, Janeway's like, "Oh, we've dealt with the Borg before, we've beat them before," and Q2 says, "Not this time, you won't." And they board the ship and they start to assimilate people, and then Q shows up and stops it. So Q is in Janeway's, wants to talk to Janeway privately. So they go to Janeway's ready room, and he's telling her that Q2 was meant to calm the Civil War down that they had in that previous episode I was talking about. But he's just causing chaos all throughout the galaxy, and just doing crazy Q stuff. And she's reluctant, but she agrees to take him in because he says that that she would make a better parent, and she says, "I'm not a parent." And then first Janeway lectures her and lectures him and says that he should be a better parent to him, and it's up to him to nurture him and give him guidance and stuff like that. So he disappears. She leaves the bridge and says, I'm going to take a break." And she's in her bathtub, and Q shows back up and says it didn't work and that it's her fault, and that he was still being chaotic, and he was like moving continents around on some world, and Q stopped him and said he could move around continents as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. So Janeway's like, this is ridiculous. And she reluctantly agrees. Uh, well, Q Janeway says that Q2 needs discipline. So they discipline him or Q disciplines him by turning him into an amoeba for like a week or something. And then he gets out of the they let him out of the little vat thing, and Q says to Q2 that he's got 1 week to change or he'll be an amoeba forever. And Q2 pouts and walks away. So Janeway assigns him, well, they get security and they follow him and they assign him quarters, and she says that he has to follow her rules, and that he's going to be testing different tests. She takes him to 7 of 9, and she's going to test him on like spatial causality. So like, if you mess with something here, like the butterfly effect, basically, if you mess with something here, it affects something over there and messes up the whole situation. So, and then he has to take Chakotay takes him to the holodeck where he has to do like a diplomacy lesson. So there's a Cardassian, a Bolian, a what else? Oh, a Nausicaan, and a Kira's species. God, I just watched Deep Space Nine, and I don't know why I keep forgetting their names. And I'm sure somebody's probably out there in the chat telling me right now. I almost had it too. Anyway, doesn't matter. They're there, and they have like a mining dispute, and that's gonna bother me. They're having a mining dispute, and so Q2 says to Chakotay, "Look, I got this. I can do this by myself." So Chakotay walks away, and he's talking to Janeway, and Janeway's like, "Are you sure that that's a good idea?" And he's like, "Well, I'm giving him a chance to fail." So they go back in 30 minutes, and Chakotay walks in, and they're all cheering, and they're happy, and he figured it out. He did it. So Q2 then is working in the mess hall with Neelix, and then Icheb comes in and invites him to go somewhere for recreation, and he says he's too busy. He's got to work on an essay for Janeway, and Icheb asks him what the essay is, and he says he doesn't know. He hasn't thought about it, and Icheb suggests that maybe you should talk about the history of the Q. Start with the beginning to where you're at now. So he agrees, and he goes to Janeway and presents the essay, and she says that you didn't write this. That I recognize Icheb's writing style, and basically, so he cheated and basically got Icheb to do the bulk of the work. And then he talks about how he negotiated peace, and she says you also cheated there when I guess they checked the logs or something. When Chakotay left, he changed the moods of he altered their their personalities so they would be more agreeable. Some would say that's altering the conditions of the test, like a certain famous captain we know. But you know, we'll call it cheating. I mean, Bones called it cheating, so we'll call it cheating. Um, then, so he, you know, says he basically begs her to help him out because he doesn't want to become an amoeba, and she says, "Okay, I'll give you another chance, but you have to be honest and you have to do it right." And so he agrees. Uh, and by at this time, like 4 days have passed, or after he agrees, 4 days pass, and he's been getting better, and he writes a new draft of the essay, an honest one. And each up, uh, as he's talking about this essay, which she says was good and did a good job, Icheb walks in and asks if Q2 wants to join him because Tom Paris is going to give him a piloting lesson. So he says, "Well, I'm too busy. I got other things to do right now." But then Janeway says, "Look, I'll give you the day off, essentially. So you might as well take advantage of this situation." So they go flying around the Delta Flyer, and they're like avoiding asteroids and stuff, and in Star Trek and other science fiction, there's asteroids are like really close together, when in real life they're not. But that's whatever. And then Q shows up to check in. Oh, they're right. They're on the flyer, and there's a alarm going off, and it's nothing major. Tom says it's like a ion imbalance, and so he's like, "Do you want to go home, or do you want to continue, with the lesson?" And they continue with the lesson, and then on the ship, Q shows up, and Janeway's like, "You still got a few days. What are you here for?" And he says that he just wanted to check in. And so when they get back, Q2 reads the essay to Q, and he's basically like, "Oh, it's fine," And he's like, "I like the part about the continuum." And Janeway's like, "The whole thing was about the continuum." And he's basically not interested, And Q2 kind of gets upset and leaves. And Janeway's like, "You could have been more encouraging. You could have said that that you were proud of him." And says he's not proud of him. That he needs to show more Q-ness. And Janeway's, it's like, "What does that mean?" And he just says it just has to be more Q. And so Janeway goes to Q2's quarters and tries to comfort him, and he's upset, and she says that because of the good job that he's been doing, that he would recommend to the continuum, that they not turn him into amoeba, but just leave him human. And he says he doesn't want to be human, and he says that he just wants to be the Q again. And so then there's a scene where Icheb is like scanning something, and Q2 wants Icheb's help to repair the Delta Flyer and that ion imbalance. So Icheb agrees, and they go get into the flyer, and then Q2 is piloting, and then he turns on like a force field and keeps Icheb, in the back of the flyer. And Icheb's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I want to go visit this planet. I learned that you can use the deflector dish to make this." I forget what they called it, but basically it's a tunnel in space that they could go, and that would be helpful, right, for Voyager, so they could continue to get to Earth a little bit sooner. But so he goes to this planet where he wants to meet these girls and stuff, and he talks about a mermaid, which I reviewed Bound Enterprise episode where they talk about a flying reptile that breathes fire. So I guess this is the precursor to that. I don't know. And a mermaid. When a ship arrives and tells them to be prepared to be boarded. Okay. And on the ship they use the tractor beam to kind of stop the Delta Flyer, but he opens what they call some sort of spatial rift. So we get another some sort of, which shows up every once in a while. And if you go out there, there's a video on YouTube that has all the some sort of or some kind of. It's pretty funny. So the ship approaches and says, "Prepare to be boarded," and Q2 says, doesn't want to be boarded, so he kind of like fires on the ship or something. And Icheb, he's like, we need to go back, and this ship is like firing on them, and so he releases Icheb from the force field because he needs him at tactical. And he's like, "It's too late. We need to get out of here." And then Icheb is like electrocuted, essentially. And the doctor said it's some form of Omicron, and I didn't catch the last word he said. I should have just gone back, but I didn't. We would get some form of. So Q2 is worried about Icheb. Says it's the only friend he's ever had, and Q shows up, and he begs Q to save him, and he's like, the only way you're gonna learn anything is to have consequences, and if those consequences mean that your friend here dies, then so be it. And Q disappears, and Q2's talking to Janeway, and he's like, so the doctor had mentioned that the only way to save Icheb is to find out like what that thing was made, the weapon or whatever that targeted him, like what it was made of, or and so Q2 says that Q was the only one that could save him, and Janeway says, "No, you can go back to those aliens and you could apologize for what you did and see if you can find out what material they used so we can cure each of them. So Q gets on the flyer. He agrees and he gets on the flyer and Janeway's with him and he apologizes and he says to you know that it was all his fault. It was his idea. All this stuff, and the alien says, "Well, in our culture," he asks Janeway, "Are you responsible for this child?" And she says, "Yes." And he says, "In our culture, we punish the adults that are responsible for the children if they make a mistake." And Egypt says, "No, it's not her fault. I'll take the punishment." And then it's revealed that this alien was Q. And Janeway's like, "Well, what about the real alien?" And he says, "Well, I was him all along." And then she says, "What about Icheb?" And he says, "I think you'll find that Icheb, the doctor will find that Icheb has a miraculous recovery." So then it's time for Q2 to be judged, and there's three Q judges, and they're wearing that same judge thing outfit from Encounter Farpoint and All Good Things. And they say that they're not going to turn them into an amoeba, but they're going to make them human. And Q gets upset and leaves. And then Q2, is disappointed. And then Q comes back and says, "Good news, I appealed immediately, and they've agreed to. They're giving you your powers back, and you can be back a part of the continuum," because he says that he would leave the continuum too, and that they can't live without him and stuff like that, which is a lie. So Q2 leaves. Before leaving, he fills Janeway's ready room with roses, and then he leaves. And Janeway asks Q, "Did they really say all those things?" And he says, "Well, the condition was that I have to be responsible for him for eternity." Bajoran. There, I got it. Yay! There was a Bajoran. Uh, it's a little slow sometimes, but it's there. I got it. I'd say this one's a kind of fun episode, and I'm partial to Q and his antics. So I gave it a 7 out of 10. But let's go and see if there's anyone in the chat. And there's Gavin Blackburn there. Okay. He says hello. Hello, Gavin Blackburn. All right. So now we enter the portion of the night where we do the random. We ran the random episode because last time I forgot to do it. So we're starting fresh now because I closed out the site and had to pull it back up. So right now it's on D Space 9. So I'm going to randomize it. See what we get. Enterprise Season 3, episode 23, Countdown. I'm assuming that has to do with like the spears, destroying the spears and stuff, because that's towards the end of the Zindi arc, and then we get into season 4, and really what the whole show should have been from the get go, the founding of the bringing together the founding members of the Federation. And if like I said before, if done right with the right people, I wouldn't mind if they did that. Did an Archer show, brought back Archer, brought back T'Pol. Pretty much, Archer, T'Pol, and Trip. And Hoshi. I like all of them except for Merryweather. Put it that way, and not because he's black. He's just not a good character and not a good actor. But anyway, that is going to be it for me tonight. Yeah, it's Kurtzman is not the right people. No, he is not. And I still see people give him praise anyway. It's amazing. It's amazing that they're completely blind to this. I don't understand it. I'm probably going to do these last 2 episodes of Strange New Worlds, and probably that, forget it. I mean, they really tested my patience this season. Anyway, thank you, Gavin Blackburn, for showing up, and thank you for anybody that's in lurking, or anybody that watches this episode in the future. This has been the Red Hour. I'm the Dead Man, and I will be back on Sunday, and then there's going to be a change because I'm switching jobs, and I'm probably going to have different days off, and Sundays are probably going to be out. I'm probably so I will keep you updated, but it'll be at the same time, just a different day.